Welcome to this episode of Sweet Speak. I'm your host, JD Miller, and we're going to continue on this trek through AI. And today we're talking about AI's future and hidden costs with Bret Greenstein. Bret is a partner at PwC and the leader of generative AI go-to-market strategy. So what does that mean? He helps clients across industries harness the power of AI and data to innovate, optimize, and transform their businesses. Bret has worked in tech consulting for over 25 years and is an influencer and ambassador in the global AI community. He's led and delivered multiple AI projects and solutions for clients ranging from large enterprises to startups in domains such as IoT, consumer healthcare, banking, retail, and oh so much more. So when we return, we have my conversation with Bret. Bret, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, JG, and that's a really, really nice introduction. Thank you.
So I'm going to dive right on it. You've seen AI's evolution over the decades. What do you believe is the game changer with generative AI today in compared to previous AI advancements?
I mean, I've been excited about AI and its potential for a long time because I love the idea of a system that learns rather than one that is prescribed. Because a prescribed system, you have to design it, code it, build it, and it's rigid. A learning-based system can get better. Now, what changed though was with generative AI is the pre-trained models. So prior to that, all AI ML was something somebody went off and had to design a model, train it themselves, and it was very specific. With generative AI, you have these pre-trained models that have decades of knowledge embedded in them. And then the patterns that emerge from that mean that every one of us can use it without having to train it. Now, you can still train it further and make it more specific, but the idea that you can get enormous value out of it without having to train it is the game changer. And it happened quickly and slowly at the same time. Like it took decades to get to a point where you could do that. And then the initial stuff could basically predict the next word in a sentence. You might type your email and a word would pop up. Then it could do a sentence, then it could do a paragraph. Now it writes entire papers and books and creates movies. That progression was really about scale, lots of data, lots of compute, and the pre-training capability that allowed us to make it useful out of the box. And then you can always extend it further.
So PwC has been shaping generative AI strategies across various industries. So what are some of the most surprising or impactful ways you're seeing companies leverage generative AI today? And I'm sure it's different than it was 12 months ago.
Yeah. I mean, 12 months ago, everybody wanted to talk about a chatbot that could answer an internal question. A chatbot could do this or that. And those were great use cases initially. People were kind of mesmerized by the idea that I could give it a request and have it generate a contract. That was amazing. But what's really happened is the integration of AI into workflows and transforming workflows to be AI first. There's a company I work with, and they had a huge volume of things that came in every day and a finite number of experts who had to review those things. And these were all documents. And they wanted to know if we could automate the work of experts. And you could do that. But when we talked to the experts, they spent 80% of their day doing mechanical things, reading content and stuff coming in, aggregating data from multiple systems, emailing people about what wasn't complete in the request. And so instead we put AI on the front of the process, and all the requests hit AI before a person ever saw them. And the AI summarized, analyzed, triaged, filled in the data, and then presented recommendations to the experts. The experts' workload dropped 50%, and they loved it because they could do other things. They could do the things they really were trained to do, and they weren't spending their time putting together data from 4 different systems to make a decision. And it was just a better way of working. This AI first thinking, I think, is really dominating how people get value from Gen AI in business.
With the demand of AI talent growing, listen, you're not learning this stuff in school today. You're learning on the job, right? So with this demand of AI talent growing, how are you in PwC helping organizations build and retain necessary skills to implement generative AI effectively?
Well, there's so many different skill sets required. I'll end on the hardest one because it's the broadest one. The skills to actually implement use cases and to build Gen AI are not the same skills who did AI ML. You still need some data science skills, but these are broader skills. They're more understanding business processes and how they work, Python skills for helping to refine prompting and tuning, and then data engineering skills to make data available to Gen AI. Those skills are adjacent to things companies had. And so we're doing the same, and a lot of our clients are doing the same, is cross-skilling and upskilling through experience, a lot of classes and things like that. This is a learnable skill set for people who are deep, have a history in data and development languages like Python. These are adjacent skills, so they can learn them. At the same time, the harder things are really around governance and business, because most people who grew up in their career, especially more senior people, spent the last few decades learning how to do this stuff in a spreadsheet or in some other tool. They don't think in an AI first mindset. And so upskilling the workforce and upskilling leaders and giving them tools every day so they can experience it, that's actually the much harder challenge. People will be the bottleneck on value realization and transformation in Gen AI, more so than the tech skills. You can always hire great companies like PwC for tech skills. You can cross-train and develop skills, and that will work. But reimagining the way that finance and supply chain and HR and workforce are done, getting leaders to start to commit to it and to trust it is a big change management challenge.
What are the key considerations? And this is as important now as ever, and it's going to continue to grow. But what are the key considerations for companies to implement generative AI responsibly, especially in sensitive areas like misinformation or bias?
Yeah. It's important to consider that generative AI, being this incredibly productive and fast thing, carries with it a lot of risk. It automates, which also means it can amplify the things that would have happened. I mean, people are biased, people make mistakes, but this can do it in an amplified state. So we have a responsible AI framework that we use internally and with our clients. Other companies have similar frameworks, and it's all about understanding and identifying those risks, looking at use cases against a risk framework instead of policies. But then also there's mitigations. There's mitigations, for example, to reduce bias by using tools that will detect the bias, and you can even mitigate it by adjusting parameters. So you can adjust for bias, but you have to recognize it can exist, that the use case can have an effect with it. You have to measure it, and then you have to rebalance the way that it performs to account for it. Then there's also things around hallucinations mitigations through providing enterprise data securely to the model in a way that then makes it specific to your business. But I think overall, it's having people who are dedicated roles. Like, there's companies already have people in charge of data privacy and security and risk. You need people who are a little more sensitive and aware and knowledgeable on generative AI risks and issues, and they're setting the policies and helping to manage the use cases through their life cycle, not just picking them, but building them, validating them, and then managing them over time.
A lot of people and companies think of AI from a business standpoint as just chatbots. It needs to move to elevating business process. And you've previously mentioned the need for AI first thinking to fully integrate generative AI into business processes. What shifts in mindset, in strategy, are necessary for companies to move from that simple chatbot use to true AI-driven transformation?
So it comes from one really, really big assertion, which is that generative AI works like people, not the same as people, but similar activities that people do. And so you have to design for a workforce that is AI and people. You could, for example, if you took invoice processing as a simple example, traditionally, invoices get sent to people who extract the key information, or they might have created a simple automation for that, and then it feeds into another system. But generative AI can read invoices very, very easily. So making it a part of the workforce, let AI be the first step. Extract all the key entities and information, integrate it into whatever your invoicing system is, and then have people focus on QA. What you want to get to is a shift in thinking that AI is the first tool you use to do something. And then our role is critical thinking and judgment and quality assurance and all these things. We're the human in the loop to make sure the output is consistent and good, but we want to lean in the productivity and speed that it has. It will read content faster by orders of magnitude than any person. So leverage it for its strength. And I think a lot of business leaders keep thinking of it as a tool to automate an existing workflow instead of a virtual workforce with scale and performance characteristics that make it so you could redesign your process to leverage AI and people to produce a better output and much faster.
Let's dive into that a little bit more. With AI evolving so rapidly, how can leaders and employees strengthen their critical thinking skills and develop the ability to leverage AI effectively rather than, again, just relying on it to answer questions?
Yeah, I mean, using it as an answer bot is a perfectly valid thing to do. It's just not transformative. And so to get to transformation, you need leaders who build and develop these T-shaped skills, broad understanding of their business and depth in something. And so if you're really deep in finance, accounting, procurement, whatever the thing is that you're really deep in, but you also have to have a broader set of skills on how does Gen AI even work? What does it do? You don't have to be a deep technologist, but the more that you understand the characteristics of it, the more you can redesign and think about the future of your business function in light of a world where AI can be a big part of your workforce. And I think people are going through exec education now to get more awareness of this. They also need to personally experience it. A lot of people say, if you don't spend a month using Gen AI every single day, you're never going to have those aha moments that help it really click for you on what it could do. Once it does click with business leaders, they can't stop thinking about it, because everything you look at, you ask your team, did you use AI to do that first? And this is the shift also that happens when people think using AI is somehow cheating at working. And there's a lot of people who have that mindset. They're stuck on it. If I used it to write performance review, if I use it to write an email to someone, if I use it to analyze a document, am I cheating by letting it do the work or the shortcut? But you're actually working smart. You're letting the tool do the things it's good at. You still have to use your judgment and thinking. I use it all day long. Sort of the power users of Gen AI in almost every industry, they are using it all day long. There's another set of people who dabble, and there's another people who are in denial. We have to help people get more comfortable with this idea that it is a smart way to work, and that you are valuable because you know what to ask it. You also know what it means when it answers, and you also know how to challenge it to make sure it's producing something useful.
Let's crack into that a little bit more. Give me some examples of business processes where an AI first approach has significantly reduced that human workload. And how do these examples illustrate the potential for AI to reshape work?
Yeah. So there's a lot of patterns that generative AI is really good at: analyzing, summarizing, Q&A, but generating is the one that most obvious to people. There are companies now who are using it for extreme personalization of their outbound communications. We all get emails every day from companies that feel generic. They don't know you, JD, or me, and we get the same email. But with a little bit of context, which could be our buying behaviors, our previous patterns, any issues or complaints we had as a customer of a company, you can personalize that email dramatically. But nobody does that because it's too much cost for each of us to personalize every email. But if you let Gen AI automatically personalize, overlay context onto your standard template, and do that at scale, you can personalize to each individual for basically no money. And now you unlock this ability to be more connected to your customers and to show more context sensitivity to your customers' needs and wants. And they're more likely to now read and convert because they're going to feel like you understood them. You didn't send them a generic email. That hyper personalization, what's happening is the effort, the cost of personalizing email goes to zero. It used to be very labor intensive. Now it basically goes to zero. So you can then tailor your business to your customers in a much greater way. You can imagine almost everything you do could be more contextualized, because Gen AI is really good at taking context data, whatever it is, buying patterns, other things you have, and overlaying it on what you ask and making it very specific. This can be done for fun. It can be done for work, but that adapting of content to an individual is a very powerful pattern.
And it takes time to train the models to be able to do that, right? You have to be diligent on what you put on to make sure you're getting out what you need. You had a post this week that really caught my eye, and you talked about the hidden costs of AI. And you mentioned that generative AI was supposed to give us more time to think and innovate, yet it's led to even more cognitive demands. So why do you think the reality diverged so much from the promise?
I think the fact that it's able to do so much of the work that we do every day is awesome. You could take a snapshot of your calendar and have it analyze your calendar for the day and just summarize it. That's awesome. You can have it generate emails for you. A lot of the things that we might do as break time. But the point is that the content of your day is now shifted into more thinking and a lot less of the natural break time you might have had to answer a bunch of emails or to look at your calendar. Like those activities, which were mental breaks between meetings or mental breaks during your day, those kind of disappear. And now you're filled with a day of a lot of intense thinking. Now, companies could let us all work half-time and still pay us the same amount. That could happen. But practically speaking, the business is still optimized on the utilization of people. At the same time, the things people do are going to be deeper, more thoughtful, more critical thinking, and a little bit less of the mechanics of the job. So we're going to have to find new ways individually and as leaders of businesses to make sure we're accounting for the fact that there's a mental stress on people if all day long is critical thinking.
Right.
If that's what your whole day is, that's going to be very intense. So leaders have to adapt because people won't be able to do that all the time. So what else, how do you leverage that new dynamic for work? So it's a really big question. I don't think anyone has solved. It's just people are experiencing it more and more.
You talk about that old work rhythm that allowed for those natural breaks, right? How do these pauses, they were significant for productivity and well-being.
Yeah.
So could AI tools ever recreate those natural pauses that we need?
I think it absolutely could. There's a lot of work that's going into AI understanding our emotions and our tone. And so the ability for it to literally observe the stress levels of us individually and to give us moments or tell us moments we need to take and do something is helpful. There's a lot of people using AI for coaching, personal coaching, mental well-being. And since it's a non-judgmental thing you can bounce ideas off of, there are people who are using it on the side just to talk to and say, and work through problems and issues or find better ways to find balance. I think there's a lot of value in that. It's really interesting to me that people are leveraging these as personal coaches in addition to the work that you do. But I think it's going to be more incumbent on business leaders to recognize that their workforce is shifting and changing. You now have AI and people doing all these complex work. We have to help people adapt to a new style of working, and then also find ways to insert that balance in their workday. And it's going to be an interesting challenge. But I think it was a crutch to think that checking your email was the way you got mental breaks. Like that, when you think of it now, it sounds kind of silly, but that people incorporated that pattern because it fit them. There'll be new patterns. There'll be exercise and health patterns people insert in their day, which will make us healthier. At the same time, find those other natural break times. If I could use that break time to exercise instead of doing email and still get as much work done, that seems like a better outcome.
You've talked about AI intensity syndrome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both intriguing and concerning. Dive a little bit more into that. And then also, I'm curious, what signs or experiences led you to identify this new pressure to use every second efficiently? And what impact does it have on my mental energy? Dive into this a little bit more for me.
So I mentioned earlier that project that shifted some of the work for these people doing all these reviews. And by having AI do the front work, they were now suddenly like hit with a giant list of stuff with recommendations and answers and decisions to make. And then it freed up their day to do other things. For them, the nature of the work became more intense, but less of their day. And then they focused on how they could make the business better. So they started focusing on those things, which was very rewarding. So, but I started to notice that more and more people are now not getting those natural breaks. They're not doing the more mundane things. Like when someone says, can you write a report? You could send your team off and they'll go spend a few days writing a report, and you're typing and thinking and writing, and it has its own pace and rhythm. But if you ask Gen AI to write that report and it writes it in 30 seconds, there's a moment of shock and awe that hits you where you realize it just did something that would have taken me a week or an hour or 10 hours. And it just did it in 30 seconds. That is a shock to people because it's hard to accept. And then secondarily, you have to review it and then get it to regen in the way you want or edit it the way you want it to do. So now you're the reviewer, not the creator. And that also creates a moment of sort of shock for people. But what I think a lot of people miss is you're the one who asked the question to generate that content, which means you have the thought of what it would be. And the fact that it did it really fast means if you don't like it, you can also redo it for very little effort and cost. So now you become an iterative coach and collaborator with AI. That coaching, collaborating is definitely a more intense way of working than spending a week writing a paper. And there's no natural breaks in that. So that's causing people to realize they need to find new ways to balance their work. I'm hopeful people will be more social. They'll be sharing more of their ideas and thoughts with each other, that they'll be inserting other things in their day that are helpful in health and well-being, and at the same time being super productive. There's a lot of talk about generative AI and is it 20 or 30% better at a business process? But I think what people miss is at certain activities, it can do it in a tenth or 1% of the time. So certain tasks become very, very fast. In aggregate, there's people in AI, so the average of a workflow might be some benefit, not as extreme. But in individual tasks, it can be incredibly fast. And that's a thing people have to get comfortable with, that having it do something that you really did spend a week on and do it in less than a minute. That's just a very different experience for end users.
Let's talk responsibility. So
Yeah.
looking ahead, do you think that organizations should play a role in managing these cognitive demands of AI on their employees, or is this more of an individual responsibility?
No, I think it's very much a business leadership responsibility. If you're optimizing your business, a big part of it is productivity, but it can't be only productivity. If you have productivity at the expense of people, obviously what happens is you have turnover and burnout and quality issues and things like that. So ensuring that your business produces the best possible results for your shareholders or other stakeholders requires that you take care of your people, that you have the most productive and advanced ways of working. Those are not mutually exclusive. You have to do both. And then making sure that the work that AI and people do together is good for your customers and your employees and any other stakeholder in your model. That also requires a governance from the top. Now, at the individual level, we are responsible obviously for managing our work-life balance and thinking through the better ways of working and leveraging the best tools. But I don't think individuals can manage this alone. I think if business leaders who figure this out are the same people who are asking really hard questions around hybrid work patterns and all these other things. How do you find the right balance of effectiveness and productivity and employee well-being and retention and the ability to attract new talent? All of these things factor into long-term success of a company.
So what advice would you give to business leaders who want to start integrating Gen AI? Where should their focus first be for the most impact?
Um, on their individual and personal understanding of how effective and impactful this is going to be today and in the future. Since Gen AI, as we experience it today, is really still at the beginner stage, and that sounds like a big statement because obviously it's an overwhelmingly cool thing and that has done amazing stuff in the last couple of years, but it's still very early days. And so in where it's going to be. And so for business leaders today, immerse yourself in it. Take whatever classes, but build it into your workday. Commit the time and energy to trying generative AI. And the reason is that you have to have a sort of a depth of immersion till you can get the aha moments on the various ways that it could help your business and your team and yourself to be more productive. So you have to immerse yourself in it. And then there are people who talk about the fact that you have to have these very scary moments where you start to worry about your job or your children's future. You have to go through those moments so that you can see that on the other side of that, every technology has created new roles, new skill sets that are needed, new business models. What we're all trying to get to is that personal challenge of the fact that not very few people were using AI every day 2 years ago. Now a lot of people use it. All the studies show it's growing dramatically. Getting it to be the default way of working, that's happening very quickly. And I worry for business leaders who are hesitant or worried about things they see in the news and not experiencing it. And I think hesitating to use this is a problem. At the same time, trusting it is a problem. What you want to do is establish an understanding of what it's good at a very personal level for whatever function you're responsible for, so that as your teams want to use it, and as you think about transformation, as you think about suppliers who could help you do that, or technologies to invest in, you have a more thoughtful and deliberate approach, and you're not getting swayed by people just pitching random ideas, but you actually have a vision for this. And it's a lot. At the same time, it's early days, so not a lot of people are far ahead of you. So it's a pretty good time to commit and learn this.
Lastly, for you, we've documented, and it's been well documented, all the things that scare us, right? About what AI could do. What excites you about the next year, 2 years of this advancements of AI?
I couldn't be more excited about it. I look at the advancement. It gets 10x better every year. Now that's happening not because it's learning on its own. I don't want people to worry about that, but it's being trained by people at great scale with new techniques and new approaches. And so watching it getting 10x better every year is incredible because the things that it can do keep expanding. So I'm excited because I expect within a year I'll be watching a full-length movie that was made entirely by a director and AI that's going to be good. Not just a movie, but a good movie. And I look at that and I think that's an incredible moment where the creative processes can be unlocked and people can create things. So maybe it's an unknown director who comes up with this concept and produces a great movie. That's amazing. I think you're seeing people writing entire books with AI, and they're not just a book, but a great book. And I think what I'm looking for is those moments of greatness that come from people with the new skill sets who have creative thinking, critical thinking, and the ability to work with AI to produce new outcomes. And those new outcomes happen all the time. Images get better, video gets better, music gets better, text gets better, analytics and data. As it improves, the exciting part is we get to experience this lifting capability, this thing that gets better every day. And so it's up to us to figure out how to take advantage of that incredible capability.
Bret, thank you so much for letting me pick your brain here today. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, JD. Great discussion. I enjoyed it very much.
Thanks again to Bret for joining in this week's Sweet Speak conversation. If you'd like to listen to past episodes of Sweet Speak, go to jamesdewayne.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Sweet Speak is a production of James Dewayne Group. Thank you for listening.